So think about your favorite holiday traditions for a second.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the food, the gifts, that warm, fuzzy feeling you get in your chest.
Right. The magic of the season.
Exactly. But have you ever stopped to wonder, like, how much of that is actually cultural magic and how much is just, well, raw primate biology?
It's a great question because it completely flips the script on how we view our own generosity, you know?
Yeah.
We usually like to keep the sacredness of our traditions totally separate from the cold, hard mechanics of our biology. But the reality is far more complex and honestly way more interesting.
Which is exactly our mission for today's Deep Dives. I'm your host and joined as always by our resident expert. And today we are unpacking a really fascinating article by anthropologist J.P. Linstroth.
Yeah, it was published on counterpunch.org, titled Primates Are Us.
Right. And we're going straight down the rabbit hole to figure out what actually makes us uniquely human, where our traditions come from, and the surprisingly neurological reasons behind why it feels so incredibly good to just give someone a present.
Yeah, prepare for a bit of a paradigm shift today. By the end of this deep dive, we're going to connect ancient desert geography to modern neuroscience.
It's a wild ride.
It really is. I mean, you'll never look at an ugly holiday sweater or even like a crow sitting on a power line the same way again.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we start scanning the brain, we kind of have to look at the behaviors themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like, why do we celebrate the way we do? When I was reading through Linstroth's piece, I was just really struck by how these traditions that we assume are super ancient and rigid are actually, well, they're a massive historical patchwork.
A historical patchwork is a really good way to put it. I mean, we hold on to these holidays like they were handed down in this pristine, finished state.
Right.
But they're constantly mutating based on, whatever society needs at that exact moment.
Take the Christmas tree, for example. We treat it like this fixed symbol, but the sources trace it back to, like, pagan tree worship.
Yeah, which then bled into the Roman Saturnalia rituals.
Exactly. And then you fast forward, and it gets adapted in 17th century Germany before it even comes close to what we recognize today.
And, I mean, don't even get me started on Santa Claus.
Oh, man, yeah, the red suit.
Right. You'd think that bright red suit is centuries of European folklore. But really, it became the global standard mostly because of Coca-Cola ads in the 20th century.
Which is just crazy to think about.
It is. You can literally see the seams where, like, commerce and theology and ancient seasonal survival tactics were all stitched together.
Even the birth of Jesus, right. The date was placed right around the winter solstice.
Yeah, and that wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate alignment with existing celebrations that marked the return of the sun. It just made the new religion much easier for pagan populations to adopt.
And then the whole gift exchange thing started as this theological nod to the Magi bringing gold and frankincense. And now it's this massive commercial enterprise.
Totally. And Hanukkah has a really similar evolutionary path in the research, too.
Right, starting with the Maccabean Revolt around, 167 to 160 BC?
Exactly. The core historical event is rededicating the Second Temple. They were waiting for consecrated oil, and the tradition says a miracle happened, where one day's worth of oil lasted for 8 days.
But then you look at how it evolved. Like, that ancient survival narrative is still intact, but the rituals expanded.
Right. Now you have daily presents and lankes, which are fried in oil to reference the miracle in the dreidels. It definitely didn't just stay frozen in 160 BC.
So it's kind of like our holidays are basically cultural open source software, right? Just constantly getting patched and updated by whoever's running the code at the time.
That's a brilliant analogy. And actually, British scholars Eric Hobsbawm and Terence Ranger gave us a great term for this. Invented tradition.
Invented tradition.
Yeah. Their thesis is that we are just hypersocial animals.
Right.
We don't just survive. We actively define ourselves and build group cohesion through these rituals.
So just because a tradition was invented or, updated recently, that doesn't make it fake.
Exactly. The fact that it evolves proves it's a living, functional mechanism.
Okay, so if our traditions are like open source software, then the environment we live in must be the hardware.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can't run a program designed for a dense jungle in the middle of a desert. How did geography actually dictate the religions early humans invented?
Well, geography is basically destiny when it comes to early theology. Linstroth points out this really profound pattern with monotheistic religions like the Judeo-Christian-Islamic faiths. They almost entirely emerge from harsh, unforgiving desert environments.
Which are defined by scarcity, right?
Mhm.
Especially a scarcity of other animals.
That's the key, that absence. Monotheism developed in total isolation from other non-human primates. In a desert, survival is this stark battle between the human tribe and the elements.
Just you and the sand.
Right. And so that often gets conceptualized under a singular distant creator.
Yeah.
But if you compare that to polytheistic religions,
Those usually pop up in lush tropical places, right?
it's exactly where life is abundant. When you're surrounded by diverse, thriving ecosystems, your worldview naturally incorporates, a multitude of spirits or gods in the rivers, the trees, the animals.
Wait, so you're saying the actual harshness of a desert literally shaped how humans separated themselves from the animal kingdom?
What's fascinating here is that the environmental isolation made human exceptionalism the most logical conclusion.
Wow.
Yeah, you really can't untangle the biology of a landscape from the social constructs built on top of it. Which brings up Maurice Bloch, a cognitive anthropologist. He divides human interaction into two buckets, the transactional social and the transcendental social.
Okay, let me make sure I've got this. The transactional social is like, it's the everyday stuff. I go to a coffee shop, hand the barista $5, they hand me a coffee, we execute the trade and move on.
Perfect example. It's just the practical mechanics of living together. But the transcendental social is a whole different beast.
Like what?
It's the realm of overt conscious social symbols. Religion, deep tradition, patriotism.
Ugh. So transactional is buying the coffee, but transcendental is standing in a massive crowd watching a giant Christmas tree get lit up.
Exactly. And think about the sheer processing power your brain needs for that tree lighting.
It's got to be a lot.
Buying coffee is simple math. But standing in that square, you're simultaneously processing historical symbolism, social hierarchy, a shared identity with thousands of strangers.
That is a massive cognitive load.
It really is. And that's specifically why our prefrontal cortex, which handles complex sociality, developed last in human evolution. It took millions of years to build a biological computer strong enough to run that transcendental software.
Okay, so our brains are literally built to handle these complex social webs.
Yes.
But what happens when you just unplug a human from that matrix? Like, if you never install the operating system, does the hardware just sit in standby?
Honestly, the reality is way darker than standby mode. To understand this, we look at the work of primatologists like Frans de Waal and Robert Sapolsky.
Right, because humans diverged from other primates, what, about 5 million years ago?
Around there, yeah.
Hmm.
But we still share this deep biological mandate with them.
Hmm.
We have to bond and share to survive. De Waal wrote a book called Age of Empathy.
Oh, I saw that in the notes.
Yeah, and he talks about monkeys raised in total isolation.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just get sad. They develop severe, debilitating mental impairments. They basically lose the ability to function as primates.
And the tragedy is we have a human parallel for this, which is just, it's devastating.
It is. The Romanian orphanages in the early 1980s.
Yeah, under the communist Ceausescu regime, abortion was illegal, which led to thousands of abandoned kids, and the conditions were just horrific, total neglect.
Babies left in cribs for days, no touch, no eye contact, no social modeling at all.
It really makes you reflect, it proves that social connection isn't just a nice bonus for humans.
No, it's a structural requirement.
Yeah.
Because the brain operates on a use it or lose it principle called synaptic pruning.
Synaptic pruning.
Right. If an infant's brain gets zero social input, it assumes those processing centers aren't necessary for survival. So it literally deletes those neural pathways to save energy.
Wow. De Waal noted that these orphans literally couldn't laugh or cry. They just rocked in a fetal position. They didn't even know how to play.
Exactly. The physical machinery for empathy was permanently dismantled before it could even turn on. It shows that our capacity to imagine someone else's pain, to feel empathy, has to be nurtured socially or it just fails to develop.
Okay, so if we physically need connection to literally build our brains, how does that translate into action? Like, does feeling someone's pain automatically make you jump in and be a hero?
That is a really crucial distinction. The sources are clear that empathy and altruism aren't the same thing.
They aren't a package deal.
Not always. Evolutionary biologist William Hamilton talked about social altruism, which is when the benefit to the person receiving help outweighs the cost to the person giving it.
So you take a loss so someone else can gain.
Right. Linstroth points to the New York City firefighters on 9/11 as the ultimate example, running into the collapsing towers to save complete strangers.
Absolute heroes.
Yes, but here's the thing. Altruistic impulses can just be for group survival. A soldier jumping on a grenade isn't necessarily feeling the emotional distress of his squad mates in that exact millisecond. It's an instinct to preserve the unit.
Ah, okay. Empathy is specifically feeling the other person's pain.
Exactly. And Sapolsky's research shows that humans do not have a monopoly on this. He looked at non-human animals consoling victims of aggression.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Sapolsky documented this in chimpanzees, crows, dogs, elephants, wolves.
Cleveland's too, yeah.
Right, so when I'm sad and my dog comes over and rests his head on my knee, or when a crow swoops down to comfort another crow that just lost a fight, that is a verifiable biological expression of sympathy. I'm not just projecting human traits onto them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shatters this illusion that we are entirely separate from nature. For centuries, we used religion to build a wall, saying empathy was proof of our unique human soul.
But really, the software is just running on a lot of different mammalian and avian hardware.
Exactly. We just have a more complex version of the exact same code.
Okay, so if a crow and I are running the same software, where is that actually located in my brain right now? Like, what does it feel like chemically when I feel bad for a friend?
So in Sapolsky's book, Behave, he pinpoints the primary actor, the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC.
The ACC. Okay, wait, I know this one. Isn't that area associated with physical pain?
Yes, it's the brain's alarm system. You slam your finger in a door, the ACC lights up. But evolution is really efficient, almost lazy, actually.
Uh-huh. How so?
Well, when early humans developed complex social lives, we needed a warning system for social damage, like the threat of being kicked out of the tribe, which meant certain death back then.
So instead of building a whole new center for hurt feelings, evolution just hot-wired it into the physical pain receptors.
That is exactly it. The ACC activates for physical pain, but also abstract social suffering, anxiety, shame, social rejection.
Oh, wow.
That's where empathic resonance comes from. When you see someone suffer, your ACC mimics the distress. A broken bone and a broken heart occupy the exact same neural real estate.
Which totally explains why extreme grief actually physically hurts in your chest.
Right. And these empathic pathways also run through the insula and the amygdala, which process facial expressions and familiar voices.
Familiar voices. Wait, so there's a catch here.
A huge catch. Because the ACC is an ancient survival tool, it defaults to what we call the in-group bias.
Meaning empathy is way easier for people we already know and identify with.
Exactly. Generating empathy for your family or friends is almost automatic. But generating that same empathy for a total stranger, that takes a massive amount of conscious cognitive effort.
Okay, but when we actually step up and help someone, what's the chemical payoff?
Dopamine.
Of course it is.
Yep. Sapolsky found that voluntary giving, doing it without being forced, triggers our chemical reward system. We get a literal neurological high from giving.
Which brings us right back to the holidays. Like, Linstroth brings up Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol.
Oh, I love this part.
Right. We usually think of it as this morality tale about Victorian capitalism. But neurologically, Ebenezer Scrooge is just a guy totally disconnected from his social matrix.
His in-group is a population of one.
Exactly. And he's miserable. So you're telling me that on Christmas morning, when he buys the prize turkey and donates to charity, he didn't just find his moral compass, he finally gave his anterior cingulate cortex a massive hit of dopamine.
Aha, yes.
Empathy is a secretly selfish transaction.
It really is. Nature is basically chemically bribing us to be good to each other. Because historically, a cooperative group survives.
Wow.
It proves that caring for others isn't just a cultural luxury. It's an ancient, non-negotiable requirement for human survival.
So what does this all mean? We started out looking at the Coca-Cola stand on Hanukkah, realizing our traditions are just invented, this cultural software we constantly update.
Right.
We saw how desert environments made us feel separate from nature. But then the biology comes in and tells a totally different story. From the tragedy of those orphanages to crows comforting each other, we are hardwired for connection. Our brains literally drug us to act like the social primates we are.
They do. But you know, Linstroth's conclusion leaves us with this really profound challenge.
What's that?
Well, we know the in-group bias is real. Empathizing with family and friends is our factory default. The dopamine is cheap there.
Very true.
So if our biology naturally defaults to tribalism, what does it mean when we choose to push past it? If we make the conscious, exhausting effort to embrace an absolute stranger in need, aren't we actively rebelling against millions of years of evolutionary limits?
Oh, wow.
Yeah? Maybe true humanity isn't found in our natural instincts, but in the moments, we actively override our biology to do something better.
Overriding the biological hardware to help a stranger, that is definitely something to think about the next time you drop a coin in a charity bucket.
Absolutely.
That warm, fuzzy feeling isn't just magic, it is millions of years of primate evolution pushing you to connect. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We wish you all incredibly well-informed and highly empathetic days ahead.